Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait for the last few people in the waiting room to enter, and we'll get going within 30 seconds or so. All right, there's going to be a few people trickling in here, but greetings. We'll get going. Thank you to everyone who is attending this evening. We're going to get started to respect everyone's time. And just as everyone is aware, and you probably received a little message as you came in, this event is being recorded. Welcome to our town hall on housing action. For those I don't know yet, I'm Mayor Sean Krausert. Here's how the format will work. I'll take the first 10 minutes or so to provide some updates. And for the rest of the time, I'm opening it up to you to ask whatever questions you might have. And the questions don't need to be related to the update I'm providing today. If you'd like to ask a question, which will be asked by the moderator, send your question to Ask a Question. Please be sure to have your microphones muted. If we don't get to all the questions, you can email them to me at sean.krausert@canmore.ca. That's sean.krausert@canmore.ca. I really look forward to hearing people's questions. Ground rules are very simple. Please try to keep your questions succinct so that we can get to as many people as possible during the hour. While I'm sure I don't need to remind everyone, I would ask that everyone remain respectful when submitting your question. So let's get started. There's no silver bullet to solve our housing crisis in Canmore. It will take a number of different initiatives and partners to be part of the solution. Tonight, I'm going to spend time dealing with detailing two main initiatives that were recommendations from the Livability Task Force. The Livability Task Force was a group of 6 members of the public and 3 council members who provided recommendations to council on a plan to phase out tourist home designation. Secondly, tax structures to incentivize long-term occupancy of homes. Third, tax structures to incentivize purpose-built rentals. And land use bylaw changes. While we're going to focus on these 2 initiatives tonight, there's so much else that has been happening around housing, such as a new Palliser Trail area structure plan, which will provide up to 1,000 units of non-market housing at build-out. Secondly, Canmore Community Housing is in the final stages of a development permit for 144 non-market rental units to be built pursuant to that Palliser Trail area structure plan. The town is also working on a concept development for non-market housing of a recently acquired provincial lands in the Palliser area. And construction of 18 non-market ownership units in Stewart Creek is underway by Canmore Community Housing. The first initiative is to limit the growth of tourist homes. While there are a few exceptions, this generally means that all existing legal tourist homes will be allowed to continue to operate, but no new tourist homes will be allowed. The exceptions are for those that are already under development and the need to comply with the TSMV-approved ASPs as they are subject of a court ruling. A related immediate change starting for the 2025 property tax year is that there is no longer an option to declare an existing tourist home for personal use. They will all be taxed at the same non-residential rate. Tourist home owners have a choice. Keep the property as a tourist home and pay the non-residential rate, or convert the property to residential to pay the residential tax rate. This is a one-time conversion. You cannot go back to tourist home if you choose this one. Also, all short-term rentals, including tourist homes being rented out, will be required to display a valid business license number in all advertising. With respect to the new livability tax program, Council set 3 objectives to impact housing: encourage long-term occupancy and increase rental supply and create a funding source. I don't know if you know this, but 26% of residential properties are only occupied occasionally in Canmore or not at all. In other words, they are not home to a primary resident. To either encourage owners to rent these out long-term or to raise funds to support initiatives that increase housing units, Council has implemented the Livability Tax Program that helps advance all three objectives. What is the Livability Tax Program? At its foundation, it is charging a higher municipal tax rate on those properties not housing a primary resident of Canmore and using these taxes to fund housing initiatives. So how does it work? Council will determine, as part of the budget process, the amount of revenue to be collected under the Livability Tax Program, which will be collected from the properties that are not primary residences of either the owner or a long-term tenant. In order to determine which properties to collect and not collect it from, owners will need to annually declare if the property was used as a primary residence. They will declare in 2024 for the purposes of calculating the 2025 property taxes. Declarations will be done online between October 30th and December 31st, and will require the entry of a unique access code and the tax roll number. Supporting documents or proof does not need to be uploaded, but should be kept as declarations are subject to audit. Proof will be required for those properties that are audited. In May, Council sets the tax rates to collect the budgeted Livability Tax Program revenue. What this means for each property depends on the budgeted revenue and who it is collected. We have heard a number of questions around the definition of primary residence. To qualify as a primary residence, 1, the property cannot be a tourist home. 2, an owner or renter must live in a dwelling unit on the property for at least 183 cumulative days in a calendar year. And 3, 60 of the days must be continuous. This does not mean the owner or renter can't go away for the weekend or on vacation. It means the property is your primary residence you return to. This provision is meant to preclude properties being rented out short-term from qualifying. It's really about where do you live and can you say that you live here at least half the year? Even if you travel away for a portion of that time. What are some of the indications of a primary residence? Well, where does your mail go? What is the address on your driver's license? Where do you intend to return after vacation? Things like that. Declarations are now open at canmore.ca housing declaration. That's canmore.ca/housing declaration. Letters were mailed to all applicable residential properties on October 30th. The letters included instructions on how to complete your declaration, including your tax roll number and unique access code. If you have any questions on the process, you can email housingaction@canmore.ca. I'm happy to note that almost 4,000 residences have already completed their declaration, and feedback, including my own experience, is that it is quick and easy to do. So that's the end of my presentation. Now let's get to your questions. Feel free to ask me questions about what you just heard or about anything else that you're wondering about. Use the chat function and send a message to ask a question. The moderator will get to as many questions as we can. Adam, do we have the first question?
Thanks for the presentation, Mayor Krausert. Very informative as always. We have a number of questions coming in, so thanks to everyone for submitting those, and we encourage you to keep submitting those questions through the chat function, and we're going to do our best to get to as many of them as we can. So Mayor Krausert, the first question, precisely, what are the proposed tax rates for the new class of taxpayer?
Well, the actual tax rate will not be determined until after we've approved the budget that we're looking to raise through this mechanism. I can advise that the presentation to council, based on numbers provided by our consultant, provided numbers that ranged from 0.1% of the property value to 0.4%. And so what that looks like, if you're a median assessed value residential, and that's at $1,043,000, At 0.1%, that's an additional $1,043. At 0.4%, that's $4,172, with all of the others being in between. Like I said, the exact amount will not be set until after we go through budget time and then after the taxes are set in May.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. Our next question, will funds from the livability program be set aside solely for housing initiatives? Is there a risk that these funds will be used for non-housing initiatives, such as the general operating budget, as an example?
They will be set aside only for housing initiatives after covering the costs of the program. So the program cost will not be borne by the rest of the taxpayers. And once that is covered, then all of those funds go to housing initiatives. They'll be used as reserve funds. And the types of things that they could be used for are things like purchasing of land, providing seed money for a non-market housing development that is eventually recouped and then could be used again. There might be some infrastructure elements to support that non-market, either servicing the lot or otherwise other infrastructure that would support the residential occupation of that property. Things like that, but they will not go into general operating reserves or general operating funds. It will be a reserve fund and treated just like all other reserve funds for their specific purposes.
Great. Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. Our next question, there was a small number of appointed members on the Livability Task Force. How does council justify this as fair engagement with all residents of Canmore in regard to the changes in the Canmore tax policy?
Well, taxes are not established based on large feedback from the public. If that was the case, we probably wouldn't have taxes. What we did was we knew that we were going in a direction and we needed to have advice from a group as to what that could look like. And so we brought together some people, a developer, commercial retail property manager, tourism industry representative, etc. And we, along with the consultant, Ben Brunin, who facilitated the discussion. Now, Ben's an expert in this area. And we went through the process of going into some deep discussions around all of these things to determine what would be reasonable or not, given Canmore circumstances. And so that is how we're moving forward, and the decision has been made.
Thanks for that. Our next question, we're getting lots of questions, so thanks to everyone on the meeting.
Excellent.
Is what will the tax be used for? Hopefully it's going toward affordable housing.
Yes, I mean, and that's, as I already mentioned, that's exactly what it'll be used for. Just to expand on it, though, in the last number or couple of decades, Canmore Community Housing has done some amazing work, and we have a few hundred or more non-market units, some ownership, some rental, but it's clearly not enough. And what we need to do in order to meet our housing crisis is we need to increase the pace and number of units that are developed. Now, in order to do that, we need funding. And there's very few funding mechanisms that we can utilize in order to do so. And so we are using what's at our disposal in order to meet the crucial need that we have in our community. So yes, all of that funding will go to non-market housing. Now, I want to talk for a moment about what is non-market housing. We're not talking about subsidized social housing, low-income housing. What we're talking about is housing that is not subject to the same market forces as market housing. There has been nothing that has been introduced to the Canmore market that has remained accessible past the first owner or two. And so, we have manufactured homes that are in the close to $1 million range, small houses in the $1 million range, small condos, $800,000. The median assessed value of our single family homes is almost $1.4 million. All of these are clearly out of range of the average person. And that is what is putting Canmore at an existential risk. If you take a look at other mountain communities who have gone before us, eventually they become basically enclaves of the very wealthy, a large percentage of second ownership. 26% is what we have now. But if we keep going, soon it's going to be 50, then it's going to be 75 or 80 in some years to come. And we can't do anything about that because that's what the market is going to drive. We have a huge demand, not locally, not only regionally, but nationally and internationally. And that allows basically those who can afford it most to get in. What happens though is that you have all of the permanent residents pushed out unless you do something about it. I don't want to be that community that buses in all of their workers, that loses their schools and their professionals, that doesn't have the town character that everybody loves right now. What I would like to see is that while that is happening, and there's some things that we can't do about that, we have the ability through non-market ownership and rental units to house a sufficient number of our community that we're able to retain the important elements that make Canmore special and make us who we are. So, long story short, yes, that money is going to go to housing initiatives that will support non-market options for people.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And our next question is one you might be able to share some insight from one of our members from the Livability Task Force, who is a local realtor. But the question is, do we see the livability tax program having an impact on home sales in the community?
Well, like I said, and as is known, um, we're a highly desirable location. I do expect there will be some second homeowners that once this is introduced, will find that they actually can't afford to stay. They might have been long-time owners. They bought it at a very different rate. And, this is not easy because I hate to see those people go, but there will be some homes that will probably likely hit the market. And I imagine that will have some impact on pricing, maybe flattening it out for a little bit. But what you'll then see is the next wave of buyers, which is pretty much the same buyers who would be coming in now, but are able to afford that tax if they're in fact going to use their house as a non-primary residence. And so I actually see not a big disruption or interruption with home sales, although you will be having a transitional period where people are perhaps changing course with their current ownership.
Our next question is the current declaration online for 2024 or the 2025 tax year? So when people are filling in the current housing livability tax program declaration, is it for next year or for this year?
Yeah. So the tax, you'll get a letter, and within that letter you will go to the site indicated there, and on your letter is both an access code as well as your property tax roll. And so what you're filling out for is the use of your home. Okay. Both, what the way that you use it, and speaking probably historically also although you're also projecting into the future, but you're filling it out now as to how you use your home. And then that will be for the 2025 tax year. The next year at this time, you'll fill out that form again, and that will be for the 2026 tax year, and so on.
Thanks for that. And Mayor Krausert, you spoke a little bit to this, but maybe you could elaborate a bit further. What are the plans for the monies raised through the tax?
Okay, so I'll just try saying it a different way, so hopefully people will catch it one way or the other. There's going to be a budget presented to council that specifically deals with the use of the livability tax program funding. Okay. I expect to see, I haven't seen anything yet because we're just approaching the budget time. But what I expect to see is that there's going to be a list of various expenses or projects or types of things that would be covered by that. And it might be a type of purchase. And it will also then list the project costs so that the total amount gained will cover the administrative costs, and then we'll go to things such as purchase of property, purchase of or seed money for projects, matching money to get financing, um, uh, infrastructure costs, those sorts of things. They'll all be laid out in the budget. They'll all be in line with the livability tax program reserve requirements that it all goes to housing initiatives. Good note, and it's a little distracting here. People are chatting or sending chats to me. I am not looking at those because I'm answering questions. And so please, if you have any comments or questions, send them to ask a question. If they go to me directly, I won't be seeing them. So if I'm not answering what's sent to me, that's the reason. I'm getting all the questions from Adam. Adam, next question.
Thanks for that. Our next question is, what if you sell or buy a residence partway through the year and you don't know what the previous owner declared, or if you're a seller, you can't guarantee the number of days they will be there? So essentially, what if you're buying or selling partway through a year? How do you know what has been declared on that property and what you need to do?
Okay. So when you are buying, there will be some adjustments for taxation. That's going to be between you and the buyer. But as far as you making your declaration, you're going to be declaring based on how you have or will be using the house. If you buy it right now, obviously you don't have any history with that home, but you know if you're moving to Canmore. And so if you're moving to Canmore and you're going to live here, that's what you'll be declaring, is how you're going to use it. It doesn't matter the way that the previous person used it.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And moving in a different direction, the new tax program, there's a potential way to perceive it as being divisive in the community. So what are your thoughts on the new tax program, and is it creating division in the community?
Well, that's a very real risk, and to some, that's the way they will see it. That's unfortunate. We're not saying that second homeowners are bad residents or bad members of the community. In fact, quite the opposite is true. We have excellent second homeowners here and who have been very active in the community. However, we have an existential threat. I'm not over exaggerating when I say that. You can take a look at any number of mountain communities, let's say in Colorado, who is a longer history than Canmore as far as a tourist destination in the mountains. And you will see what happens to those communities. Those communities are gutted from what they once were. They become something else, but that's something else is not what a majority of Canmore residents want. What a majority of Canmore residents want is a fully functioning community, one that continues to provide a place for some young families and schools and professionals and all sorts of real practical needs, grocery stores and whatnot that and a diversity of demographics that make Canmore an interesting and lively and vibrant place. Not interested, and by we, I'm saying the majority of residents are not interested in basically hollowing out the character of our community and having this simply a bedroom community that loses a lot of that functionality uh, due to the fact that permanent residents are no longer able to be here. So we need to address that. And unfortunately, we need to make some hard choices. We don't do so with hate. We do so out of necessity. Canmore or council's primary objective, and this is every council's primary objective, is to act in the best interests of the community as a whole. No particular segment of that community, no particular neighborhood in that community, no particular industry in that community, but the community as a whole. And what this council is recognizing that is something bold and very different isn't done, we are going to go the exact same way as those other communities.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And yeah, lots of information there. Our next question: has the Government of Alberta Department of Municipal Affairs approved the livability tax program?
Well, in a way, yes, because this is done completely in alignment with the Municipal Government Act, which is basically the rules that all municipalities have to follow. So yes. Do we have to submit to the Municipal Affairs for approval? No. However, I have been seeing some responses from Municipal Affairs to letters written to them, and they have indicated that this is perfectly within our ability to do, and that we are in accordance with the Municipal Government Act.
Thanks for that. Our next question, and this is related to the Livability Task Force, Mayor Krausert. So are the members of the Livability Task Force public knowledge? If so, are you able to share who was on that committee and how they were selected?
Yeah, they were chosen by council. We wanted to have a certain type of interest chosen. It's all public record. It's been in public meetings. It's been reported in the paper. The task force is now disbanded, but you can certainly look it up. I can recall that there's, and I'm going to miss somebody here, but there was Dan Sparks and Frank Kernick and Darren. Sorry, I'm forgetting Darren's name. Rachel Ludwig. Darren from he's a. Oh, see, I shouldn't be naming it right off the top of my head here. Perhaps Therese, you're on the line. Do you recall the names of the members that were on the task force?
Yes, Mayor Krausert. We had Lisa DeSoto, who was representing Canmore Community Housing. And Darren was with Asset West Property Management. They represent short-term and long-term.
My apologies to Darren for missing his name.
Yeah. And I think you got the rest.
Yeah. Frank Kernick, a developer. Rachel Ludwig. Was she
3 members of council?
Yeah. And 3 members of council. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but yes. So short answer is yes, of course they were public. And they were dealt with in public council meetings on multiple occasions.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. Our next question, I believe, is related to the tourist home portion of what you discussed.
Sure. Just before we get that, I just remembered there was another part of that last question, and how were they chosen? The council set out areas that we wanted to have represented, and administration went and basically sought representatives from those sorts of areas, put them to council as recommendations, and council then approved them. That's how it was done.
Thanks for that addition. So the next question, yes, I believe is related to the tourist home portion of what we're discussing. So why is TSMB exempt from these new rules?
Basically, What the new rules are is that we're not going to allow new tourist homes to be developed unless you already have had they're already being built, or you already have your development permit in and it's being approved. Now, TSMV is a special case because its area structure plans, which include tourist homes, were subject of court order that the Canmore had to approve. Therefore, if we then were to deny use or certain uses to be built as they were set out in those ASPs, we would be in contravention of the order and in contempt of court.
Thanks for that. Our next question is speaking beyond the housing action items here, but is there currently available land in the community for new housing builds? And if so, is there a place where members of the public can find a plan for what that is and a timeline of the rollout?
Well, there is land available for new builds. Vast majority of it is privately owned. And so when you look at the Three Sisters area, 80% of the developable land in Canmore is up there. And now I've been saying that stat for years, given that other things have continued to develop. Maybe it's even a higher percentage of the remaining build that's available. So their plans, their ASPs have been approved. The conceptual scheme for one of the areas is approved and the other one is coming. Those plans, which you can find on the town website, have general phasing, but you won't know exact timelines for them because there's a number of factors in place: market forces, availability of supplies and contractors, um, uh, just the sheer volume of the build. Estimates are that build out will be anywhere between 30 and 50 years. And all I know is that's a wrong estimate. It's going to be what it is. As far as publicly owned lands, there's very few. Most of them are in the Palliser area. And that's why this council, when it was first elected, made it its very first priority is to get an area structure plan done for the Palliser area, because all of the lands that are able to be built within that area are either owned by the town or through the town subsidiary, Canmore Community Housing. And so we are able to really work with those lands, and we've designed or approved an ASP that will allow for about 1,300 residential units, with a minimum of 75% of those being non-market. So earlier, I misspoke when I said up to 1,000 units. It's actually going to be at least 1,000 units, because 75% is like in the high 900s, and so it's going to be more than that. Timing for that, well, once again, it depends if we can get funding lined up. We get sufficient resources to move these things forward. There will likely be some partnerships involved to get some things going concurrently. And you're going to see build up in that area probably take about 10 years. I hope it's going to be sooner. If I have anything to do that can make that go faster, certainly I'll be encouraging that. It was being built. I saw the 10 years in there, and I went, couldn't we put 5? But the reality is not all of that's going to be built. So that's the timing, and you can look for those plans on the town. I should note there are a few other pieces here or there, but not nearly of the scale of Palliser area, Trail area. So if you get 1,300 homes there, the other pieces of land that the town owns, just spitballing here, is probably about another 200 homes. So that's about 1,500 homes. And then within the ASPs of Three Sisters, there is some non-market that's going to come for that, but over a long period of time, as well as some entry-level homes as well. Now, as I've noted, anything on the market tends to escalate, but the entry-level homes will at least help in the first instance.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And we have lots of questions. So thanks to everyone for these. I don't think we're going to get to them all, but as Mayor Krausert said, if we don't get to your question, you can email it directly at sean.krausert@canmore.ca. So our next question, Mayor Krausert, in the past, tourist homes were taxed at approximately 3 times the rate of residential.
Yep.
Is it likely that non-primary residents might pay something similar to that? And I know you spoke a little bit to this earlier, but yeah, wondering what the tax rates will look like.
It's tough to say. You're exactly right. 3 times. It's actually 3.1 times currently. And that's just a little history on tourist homes. When that was first developed, all tourist homes were taxed at that rate, and there was no personal use declaration. That came in after the fact, and there was no guarantee it would last, which is obvious now since we've removed it and gone back to the original intent. Basically because those are properties that are capable of commercial activity and therefore should be taxed as commercial end. So the exact amount, no, I can't say right now. I gave some numbers earlier. We'll have to see what the budget is that was being put forward and what that then amounts to as a tax rate that flows out of the calculations with that number.
Thanks for that. Our next question, are any areas in Canmore exempt from the new tax?
If you don't fall within one of the exemptions that's there, like tourist homes, that could be obviously owned by somebody that doesn't live here, but if they're classified as a term, they're going to be taxed as a commercial entity, and it's only legal tourist homes. If you're outside of the area and operating that way, we're going to be enforcing against that and going to be shutting down that operation. There are other exemptions that are on a person-by-person basis. For example, if the primary resident dies, there's an exemption for that for a period of time. There's is hospitalized for an extended period of time. Those sorts of things, but no, it applies all across the community and to all zones.
Thank you. Our next question, is there evidence that this type of tax helps affordability in communities?
It all depends what you use the money for. There is evidence that it increases primary residence. It doesn't necessarily, in those situations, reduce rental amounts. However, what Canmore is using the funds for is to create affordable housing. Our housing is so much higher than the next community in Alberta that our living wage is about 50% higher than the next community, and that boils down to housing. Because when a living wage is calculated, there's various inputs. If you could input housing, if we had sufficient housing, you could input the cost of the non-market housing, our living wage drops right down to the bulk of the other communities that calculate living wage. So it really does affect affordability when you increase affordable housing. And since we're using it for affordable housing, it will affect affordability.
Thanks for that. And our next question is, what is the cost to administer the new livability tax program?
Great question. I haven't seen the budget yet. And so when we see that budget, it will be part of a public process or a public open to the public process. Our finance committees will receive them first, and you'll know when I know.
And our next question, many cities have eliminated short-term rentals such as Airbnb to open up more units for affordable local housing. Has this been considered for Canmore?
Well, the problem is that all of those tourist homes are market homes and owned privately. And so when they sell, they're going to sell as a private market home. If you own a condo or you own selling it for what you can get on the market. As we've mentioned, that does not increase affordability, certainly not over the long run. So if you shut those down, you're simply increasing the number of homes that can be bought up, most likely for second homeowners, since the price is not conducive to local.
Thanks for that. Our next question is about the audit process. So if an individual household would be audited in the future and there's a dispute with the town regarding how many days per year household members live there, how will the dispute be adjudicated?
That's a great question. It's a brand new program. Obviously, we haven't done a single audit yet. Stand the process to be generally, and then I'm going to see if either Sally Caudill, our CAO, or Therese Rogers, our GM of corporate services, wants to add. But generally, the audit is going to determine whether or not this is residence. Let me tell you, if it gets down to counting days, that's not a good thing for anybody. I mean, it is either somebody's primary residence or it's not. Do you get your mail here all the time? Is your address on your driver's license? You know, specifics will be rolled out, and certainly not a governance matter. It's an operational matter. So council won't be set specifically on that task. But you know, primary residence is not a new issue. It's something that we deal with all the time. You vote where your primary residence is. You pay taxes based on your primary residence. And so we will be able to do at least the vast majority. I don't think we're going to come down to counting days. Now I'll open it to either Sally or Therese if you have anything to add.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mayor Krausert. As the declaration process is part of the assessment subclass process, we anticipate that any challenges or any discrepancies that can't be resolved would go through the assessment review board process. And that's outlined also in the Municipal Government Act and on our website.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. So on to our next question. Have there been studies to understand how part-time residents contribute to the local economy?
There have been studies or there's been economic studies as far as what part-time residents and visitors and full-time residents spend. I don't see how that's going to be to any degree. I know that there will be some that say that they're going to be treated as a second-class citizen. They're not going to spend their money here. And I've heard that in a variety of different circumstances and different situations. And I understand the frustration. I understand the anger. And I understand the disappointment. But it actually doesn't have, at the end of the day, the impact that is suggested.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. Our next question. Has council required recent developments, such as on Silvertip, for example, to set aside a percentage of the units for affordable housing? And if not, why not?
We're not allowed. That's called inclusionary zoning, and it's not allowed in Alberta.
Thank you. Just getting through the questions. There's a lot of them here.
I should do more short answers like that and get through some more. I'll try to.
So our next question, Mayor Krausert, will the rate vary year over year or will it stay consistent?
Consistency is better. We're still at the front end, and having not seen a budget yet and had the opportunity to ask those questions and how this looks over a long-term budget, I can't tell you for certainty. I expect that there might be, as happens with taxes, some variance, but I wouldn't want to see this hopping all over the place. So I will be preferring, my one voice out of 7 will be preferring some form of consistency.
Thank you. And coming back to the Livability Task Force, were there any public members on the Livability Task Force who would be considered part-time residents in Canmore?
No.
Thanks for that. So this question is related to the Canada Revenue Agency and primary residence. How does saying that this is their primary residence relate to the conditions of primary residence for the CRA? And are there any conflicts there?
I do not know. They are different systems, and so it very well could be some difference. I would think for the vast majority, they would be the same. But there may be circumstances in which one is a primary residence by one standard, but not by the other. They're unrelated, they're different levels of government, and they're not dependent on each other whatsoever.
Thank you. Our next question, how are non-market homes being built to make the homes low cost? Who owns non-market homes?
Well, the thing about non-market homes is not necessarily that they're built a lot cheaper. In fact, there's a certain cost to build, and you're going to have to pay that. And then when you start to add more features and higher quality stuff, it can go higher. What the difference between non-market and for-market builds are is that there isn't a profit element built into the home, and the homes are not put on sale at what would be a market price. So if you build it for 450,000, there might be an administrative cost on top of that, but you're going to be selling it for in that range of 450,000. However, if you were building for the market and you build it for 450, but you could get 600, you'd sell it for 600. So that's the difference in how you get the different pricing. This non-market housing is not necessarily cheap. We're not talking about being able to buy here cheaper than in Calgary. I expect that it's still going to be more expensive than purchasing in Calgary or otherwise. Just like you can see right now, you can go to the Canmore Community Housing website and see what they're selling things for, and that's what we'll be selling for. But they're a lot more accessible, a lot more within reach of more of the population than the market homes.
Thank you. And our next question is, can you clarify, Mayor Krausert, what will the funds generated from the livability tax program be used for? Is it strictly for below market housing initiatives? Is it for things related to affordability and livability? What will it be used for?
Actually, now that when you mention that, yes, I mean it's mostly housing, but I mean there might be something that's in the affordability realm. I'd have to look at the terms of the reserve. So you can look up the livability tax force. Actually, Therese, what's the name of the reserve, and do we have that on available online yet?
It should be, yes, and it's called the Livability Reserve. And we talked about incentivizing potentially purpose-built rentals, non-market housing, supporting infrastructure, as you shared, incentivizing the development of accessory dwelling units that would create new housing, grants to nonprofit housing groups to develop affordable housing, and the preservation of existing affordable units. So there's an opportunity also to continue to purchase affordable units to keep them in that inventory.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that CCH has piloted
Yes.
recently, is to buy some and then be able to keep that price down.
Mhm.
So there you go. Thank you very much, Therese. That's a more complete answer, and you can look up the livability reserve on the Canmore website.
Thank you both. Our next question, and Mayor Krausert, you've spoken to this a little bit, but if there's anything further you want to elaborate here. So this question is, affordable housing and quality infrastructure are worthwhile objectives. Why should a minority segment of property owners pay more for that?
You know, every residence in town has to be part of the solution housing crisis, either by housing a primary resident or paying a higher tax. And so there are choices to be made. There are hard choices to be made, but it is a choice. And so for those who choose not to have a primary resident within their home, they're going to pay a higher tax. And that funding will go to the solution. And, you know, as I spoke to earlier, the problem that Canmore is facing is second home ownership. It's not that the second homeowners are bad people. They're great people. But the concept itself, second home ownership itself, is the thing that guts a community such as ours. And we've seen it happen before, and we're going down that exact same road unless we do something vitally different. That means hard choices, bold choices, and it's not going to be and so it's not saying well, let's just put it this way. We're giving people a choice, and for those who choose to not have a primary residence, their choice is then to pay higher taxes.
Thanks, Mayor Krausert. Our next question, have you identified lands where the town could build perpetually affordable housing, and if so, where?
Yes, Palliser Trail is the biggest area of lands. 1,300 homes can be built there. All of the lands there are owned by either the town of Canmore or Canmore Community Housing. There are some other smaller pieces of land at various spots in the community, and I'm talking less than 5, like 4, 3 or 4, that could build, you know, maybe dozens or several dozen units, but most of it will be on the Palliser Trail in the Palliser Trail Area Structure Plan, which runs parallel to the Trans-Canada Highway on the north or the east side of the highway.
Thanks for that. And then the next question is there a sunset clause in this program or in the legislation?
Not specifically, but every piece of legislation that council has is reviewed every term. And at least that's the objective. And we certainly deal with these sorts of things will be dealt with on an annual basis. And so at every point, there's a possibility that we can say we're done, or it's not working, or we need to tweak it and do it a little differently. And so no to the sunset clause, but yes, that it will be looked at often, and there may be changes over time.
Thank you. And our next question, we're going to come back to the potential rates of the livability tax program, and this is speaking specifically to mill rates. So you mentioned that the rate will be 0.1 to 0.4%. Do you mean that's on top of the existing mill rate? So for example, a residential home rate in 2024 was 4.6%. Was that 0.1 to 0.4% on top of the 4.6%?
I can jump in there for you, Mayor
Yeah.
Krausert, and just clarify that the 0.1 to 0.4 percentage is a percent of the assessed value of the home, and that would be on top of the regular mill rate. Does that help you out?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we don't set the other. The mill rate is a result of a calculation. You take your assessed value over the certain class, and you take your budget, and your mill rate pops out. What will be added to that will be an additional amount non-primary residents. that it will be some percentage of assessed value.
Thank you. And you've spoken a little bit to this, Mayor Krausert, but to clarify, are we going to ensure that there's predictability year over year on what the livability tax rate will be once it's established, or will there be large variability in tax rate subject to annual budgets?
The advice that I've heard, and we will find out more when this is presented to council by administration, is that you go in at the tax rate that you think that you'll want to be staying at. You go in right to it. You don't go up to it slowly. You go right to it. And then my understanding is you try to stay there.
You. And our next question is, do you feel that we should be able to accommodate anyone who chooses to live in Canmore?
We can't accommodate anyone who wishes to live in Canmore, but we do have certain needs in our community. We need to have sufficient number of housing opportunities so that our businesses can be open and run as long as they desire. We have a number of restaurants that over recent years have been so understaffed that they can't be open as long as they would like to. There's hotels that you have all the managerial staff going and doing changeover of rooms. You have, you know, school boards that have to accept or make 6 offers to fill 1 position. We see that at the town. You have a high level of interest, but when it comes down to it, you have to make so many offers. So we need more housing. Not everybody's going to be here, be able to stay here. Even with that, you're going to have people that can't afford to be here. So this isn't about just if you want to be here, you get to be here. It's still going to be a sacrifice. It's going to be a sacrifice to live in the non-market units too. When I bought my home, I thought I was the dumbest individual alive. And I thought there's no way my house is ever going to sell for more than I bought it for, because we had to skimp and save and borrow. And financially, it was probably a very dumb decision to make at the time. Now, I'm fortunate that my little house has gone up in value, but I'll tell you what, I couldn't afford to buy it now. No, I don't think that anybody that wants to be here has a right to be here. However, we do need to create the opportunity to be here that can be here, and we need to do so for the economic well-being of our community.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And I'm conscious that we have about 1 or 2 minutes left, so we can get to another question. We have many we won't be able to get to, but I'd like to ask you, do you have any final words you'd like to say, or would you like to do one more question?
You know, I can go a few minutes longer if we can get a few more in. So let's try to answer some questions, more questions.
Sure. So the next question would be, in the past, has Canmore ever required developers to include some portion of below market housing? And if not, what does the council or anyone else need to do to make that possible in the future?
We need to be able to convince the provincial government to change the laws. And by all indications in this regard, they're not. That's called inclusionary zoning, and it's allowed in some jurisdictions, but it's not allowed in Alberta. And so we cannot require a developer to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. We try to incentivize it. We have something called density bonusing. And we also have some excellent developers in town that offer up some homes for Canmore community housing just because they're community minded. But we cannot require it.
Thanks for that. And our next question is, can you speak to why apartment condos are exempt?
Well, I would turn that over to Therese. Really, it's about when you have a single owner of rental units, of a large number of rental units. That's what we're talking about, an apartment condo. We're not talking about a condominiumized building. A condominiumized building, all of those owners will have to declare. But an apartment that has by the same owner and for rent, they're not included. Therese, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Just to build a little bit on what you said, Mayor Krausert, we did look at the apartment units that you described, and they are really largely rental. Those units are 100% rental units. And in speaking with the owners of those buildings, they're in the 95 plus range being rented to primary residents. So it didn't really qualify in the same way. And we felt that met the criteria that we were looking for.
Yeah. And just to be clear, if you live in a condominiumized apartment, though, minimized with each unit being individually owned, you do need to make a declaration if you want to get the lower tax rate.
Thanks for that. And maybe our final question of the evening is, when do we expect construction to start in the Palliser project? And when can we expect the first occupancy, as a rough guess?
Well, that's really a question for Canmore Community Housing, but I'll tell you what I know. Their development permit is nearing final stages. I believe that they're looking to break ground as soon as they can in 2025. And I believe that the first occupancy would be late 2026. Although, don't quote me on that because I'm not the one setting the timelines.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. And with that, that's all the time we have this evening. So I will say thank you to you, Mayor Krausert, for your time and in answering all the questions. And I realize there's a number we didn't get to. So you can, again, send those directly to Mayor Krausert. You can also send any related to the livability tax program to housingaction@canmore.ca. And I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Krausert, if you have any final words.
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time this evening. It's my pleasure to be here and answer questions. I hope that I was able to answer questions, even if it wasn't necessarily an answer that you liked. I know that with this program, for some answers that we're providing is certainly something that they don't like, and that's hard. Nobody is doing this because we want to hurt anyone or cause a problem for anyone. But the reality is that we need to make some serious, difficult choices for the good of our community, and that's what we have done. So I do encourage continued questions, and I do wish everyone well for the rest of the evening, and I look forward to the next time that we gather together for a virtual town hall.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.